Welcome to Giants Nation. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, the Football Grump, and we've got our 53-man roster prediction as we approach cutdown day tomorrow. So make sure you listen now before it gets dated. And then we got Patricia Traina of Sports Illustrated and Locked On Giants joining us for a little interview. Grump, we've I mean, I'm excited to get this week done because we have our South of the Border show Friday, but also it's like the season's right here. Like I did the film review for Patreon, and I did the last Jaxson Dart play. I was like, and this is the last Jaxson Dart play for a while, which means the games are here. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is always that weird time of year where we go through months and months and months of like the season's coming, the season's coming, the season's coming. And then you get to like training camp and it's just camp and it's really hot out. So it's not football season. Then you get to the preseason games and you're like, you have that thing where you're just like, I don't want to take this too seriously because it's not real yet. And you have constant reminders that it's not real, from the broadcast down to the players, down to the vanilla defenses. And then a week passes and then you're here. It's now, right now. This is actually, I think, one of the sadder episodes. This is where we start getting into like some guys that aren't going to make the cut every single year. There's players that we like, whether they deserve to be here or not. There's always players that we like that we have to say goodbye to. And then the next thing you know, it's the happy episode. We're doing our predictions on our preview of week 1. So
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready for the big switch.
You know what the most depressing hour on social media is? It's not like just like the final cutdown moments. It's when the final cutdowns, and they usually have a practice right after that, and the beat reporters put out clips of the practice, and it's noticeable. Like, there's only 50 guys out here compared to the 90 that they've had for a month. It's like, wow, this is the team. Let's get in it. But speaking of people that make the team, Mark Peel. Here's some special people who make the team. Marco Peel. I almost called you Mark. Your name's Marco, and I would never disrespect you. Pat Cupo or Capo. He's got a cup of Pat. Michael Lynch. Your parents should have named you Marshawn. It'd been really funny. Laney Fileski. Laney was one of my mom's friends who was like felt comfortable enough to discipline me as a kid. I remember you, Laney. Seth Kaufman. Uh, and it's Andy's brother, Jonathan Sander, and it's not Sanders. I've never seen that before. Davis P. I'm not gonna call you that guy who got in a lot of trouble but then got away with it because he's rich. Tuo Mas Corranta. I think I got that right. Ed Booty, or that's actually our friend from Big Blue Huddle. We got Lil Jordan Ronan, and then Mike Just the Thibodeau Cone. You guys do your own jokes, so I'm not gonna make jokes on top of those. Who are these special people, Grump?
These people are heroes who went to patreon.com/Giants Nation and signed up, where they can get access to episodes like this behind the scenes when they're being recorded. They also get entered into a raffle every month to win free stuff. And they also get a sticker in the mail from you, Bobby Skinner.
Multiple stickers. How about that? All right, let's get into our 53-man. You'll be glad you did. Let's get into our 53-man rosters. So, as of this recording, there is 10 guys down, so which means you have 27 cuts to go. Out of those 10, I think there's only one guy who I thought, or I'll say two, who people really thought might have had a chance at the 53. That being wide receiver Montrell Washington and safety Kayvon Wallace. The rest are Deontay Johnson, who before camp, you would have said that. After camp, or at the end of camp, not so much. O'Donnell, Fortune, Zach Pascal, KJ Cloyd, Jordan Blythe, Jimmy Morrissey, Jason Williams, and then TJ Moore was put on IR. So let's go offense. Let's start with the quarterback position, as always. We finally hit it. Maybe the end of the road. I think we both have three, and that being Russell Wilson, Jaxson Dart, and Jameis Winston. You've been seeing a little four quarterback conversation start to formulate. Do you buy into that at all, Grump?
Well, I'll say a couple of things here. Number one, I think you said the saddest thing is seeing that there's only like 50 guys on the practice field. I think the saddest thing is when they announced the 53-man roster and then like a day later, the guys who just barely made it in are excited to have made an NFL roster and getting cut for someone that got cut from another team and they get cut anyway. So I do think that whatever happens with the initial 53, there's some shenanigans that could happen. Do I buy into the trade of Jameis Winston away, or do I buy into, Tommy DeVito going somewhere or staying because he could later be traded somewhere or something like that? I don't think that there's a 0% chance of that stuff happening. But if I am putting money down, I'm not putting money on any of that stuff happening. I have the same 3 that you do. I think that Joe Shane and Brian Dable know that they made mistakes after they had a winning season in their first season, and they got a little too confident with what they were doing, thought that they could accelerate plans, and I think that they've revisited that, and they did a really good job, in my opinion, this offseason in setting up the right infrastructure for the long haul. And that means drafting a quarterback that you believe in and giving him the surrounding stuff to succeed, whether that be O-line investments or, I think this is a starting quarterback that can let him sit and relax. And in case he gets hurt, you have a backup for 2 years with Jameis Winston. And I think that they're going to stick with the plan.
So here's what I'll say though with DeVito. If for some reason they get down the cut down day and they put out the roster and it has 4 quarterbacks, I'm not going, what the hell are we keeping 4 quarterbacks for? My thoughts are now, all right, they're trying to trade somebody because that would be the idea of just keeping 4 quarterbacks for the sake of keeping 4 quarterbacks to me is just totally foreign. Like I don't buy into that being a good strategy at all. But if they keep all, and I don't think they do either. It's not the Browns where they have 2 rookie quarterbacks on the team. Even then, the Browns should probably just cut Kenny Pickett. Uh, so I'm expecting that, or yeah, they may have a trade in place, or they're working on trades. And if that trade falls through, then in 2 days, then you'll get the Tommy DeVito has been released or placed on what has been waived. And opening him up to that second market. That's the only thing I could see because I don't think they're actually going to keep 4 quarterbacks. But uh, I actually will be excited I will actually be excited if they keep that 4th quarterback at cutdown day because I would love to get something out of Tommy DeVito besides just saying thank you for your service and move on. Even if it is hell, if it's a 7th round pick swap, that's happened before too. You remember the B.J. Goodson trade back in 2019 with the Packers, where they swapped their 7th round picks. So even if that difference was 10 picks, you get that. I would take whatever you could get. But and the idea of just keeping 3 quarterbacks, I don't see that happening at all.
No, me either. And the Browns have a different situation with 2 rookie quarterbacks and then like an ancient one. But there are other problems with this roster, and we're going to get through it as we go through the other positions where I don't know about you, but I struggled at a number of spots. This was one of the hardest 53-man rosters I've had for the bottom portion. I have a lot of things that could have happened, or I could be convinced one way or another. Um, and that I think speaks to probably a couple of years worth of bad roster management, and they're just not in a position to be really liberal with their quarterback room right now. Not in my opinion.
Yeah. Let's do running back. Tracy Scatterbo locks. I think Singletary's a lock. Are you keeping 4? Are you keeping Dante Miller?
I'm not. I went 3 with those 3. Yeah.
1, I'm not. I think Dante Miller is not going to get claimed. You just don't see it happen. You don't see guys who have not played in the NFL or weren't draft picks get claimed. It just doesn't happen. We talk about worried about guys getting claimed. And, the last guy to get claimed for the Giants was in 2021, Ryan Connolly. And that was a 2nd-year, 4th-round pick, So, like, that is someone who had some type of status. Hell, was even starting games before he got injured. Never forget, this is the episode, I'll remind you, because people are like, Bobby lost his shit. I was right. Devontae Downs started games, okay? T.J. Brunson never played a snap, made the roster. I'll never let that go. I was right about Ryan Connolly. In all seriousness, I don't think we're worrying about losing Miller. I think his preseason is a bit overrated. Now, that speed is not overrated. It's very real. And if the Giants didn't have money, if the Giants could save money on Devin Singletary, I would be on board. Like, yeah, cut Singletary, save the $3 million in cap space, and then, use Dante Miller as your 3rd running back. You're probably not going to use him much, but you can throw him a screen pass or just try and get him space here or there. But the reality is those screen passes should be going to either Tracy or Scatterbo. As a runner, I don't think he showed very much in the preseason. He had the 11th most carries, 31st most yards. And you would think a guy with his speed would at least have like 1 breakaway run to, inflate the numbers. He was 30th of 38 running backs in yards per carry of guys who got 20 carries. He can't block. In reality, Singletary is a better player, and you're not saving money by moving on from Singletary. And you mentioned, like, there's a lot tougher decisions on other spots. I'm not keeping a fourth running back when I have three guys who might be able to start games for me.
Yeah, I mean, all the things you said, I'll back up. Um, but in addition to that, I think just as a runner, he still has a lot of development to go. There's still some vision things I think he could do better. He could do a little bit more in the open field, except run directly straight. I think that he can continue to work on that. And I think that he's somebody that is going to sneak onto the practice squad. I know Giants fans are like he's way too good to for a team to not notice him, but like in the preseason, running back is just one of those things that's on showcase. Like every team has a guy sort of like Dante Miller in some way, shape, or form. There are UFL players that I think at the running back position could, in the right system, do very well in the NFL. And there's just so many things. I mean, we could open up the running back position value.
Jonathan Ward had a receiving screen pass touchdown, and I obviously Miller has the speed though, so like that is something that puts him apart than your just run of the mill, John Hillman, Rob Martin guys that we've seen over the years play running back in the preseason.
Yeah, but I'm reminded of seventh round pick Darrell Scott. I believe he was a seventh round pick that the Giants had. He had a 98-yard touchdown against the Bears in the preseason. He was the same thing where he's just a lot of straight line speed, never amounted to anything.
Let's do wide receiver. Neighbors Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson are locks. I'm keeping three more. Jalin Hyatt, which if we did a mailbag thing and said who would be your surprise cut, I think mine would be Jalin Hyatt. Because he doesn't have the big contract that Evan Neal has. I think his preseason game frustrated when I went and watched the film, bro. It frustrated me more than the drops. And I put out the film review on Patreon, and I put this clip out on Twitter where he's got man coverage, that 4th down and 4 where dart scrambles. If he releases outside and the corner is cheating inside leverage, if he releases outside, he's going to get a target. He's going to get a deep target. And he releases inside, funnels himself into the safety, and it's just you don't play the position, and you don't bring value to this team. Like the occasional deep pass or 2 deep passes in a row you may get is just not worth it. But I am going to keep Hyatt. Bo Collins, I think they've really liked Bo Collins. He's kind of been their first guy up. He can special teams. He can block. And then this is where I can see myself being a little frustrated on cutdown day. Amir Smith-Marset. I value him more than Gunner as a returner, and I just do not think Gunner is a real receiving threat. I think if you put him in NFL regular season games in the slot, he would not do anything. And hell, he's had the opportunity to do that in his career, and he's never been able to. Like, we're not talking about a brand new guy who's never gotten a shot. He's been a returner for the Patriots, Steelers, and Giants. None of them have ever valued him as a receiver. I value Smith-Marset as a receiver, as a returner more. A guy who had a kick return touchdown for the Giants last year, had a punt return touchdown that was called back. I'm keeping Smith-Marset over Gunnar Olszewski.
So this is the first one where we're slightly different here. Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, others are your lock starters. I do think that Jalin Hyatt stays, but I agree with you that he could be a surprise cut. In addition to everything that you said, he also offers nothing on special teams. Bo Collins I have in here, but I could see him being swapped out. Because I do think he could slide onto the practice squad. And this is the beginning of my frustration with trying to get 53 guys on this roster is I don't see and I have sorry, well, I'll get into that in a second. But I went with Gunnar Olszewski because I found the benching of Amir Smith-Marset to be ominous. I don't really know exactly what it means. But I view the two of them as like a flip of a coin personally. I don't really as far as returners, I think they're pretty close. As far as receivers, I think that they're pretty close. I'm more so going on trying to read some tea leaves in Amir Smith-Marset's frustration that he vented out on Twitter and just like the benching in general. And they like Gunner. It's pretty obvious that they do like Gunner. So
he would have been their returner last year if he didn't get injured coming in the training camp, and Smith-Marset would have never joined this team. So this is a prediction, right? Whenever we do our 53-man roster episode in May, like we always talk about, like it's predictive with our opinions on it. This is fully predictive what we're doing right now. Um, this is the one where I'm just kind of ignoring some of the tea leaves though. But like Smith Marset tweeting LOL after that second preseason game. Now I played in the third one, but they gave him a wildcat, quarterbacks. I don't know. With special teamers, it's a lot harder to do that. And if they just view Smith Marset as someone who's just their guy, then they don't need to see him out there. The same way Graham Gano's not playing in the second and third preseason game. I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I actually could be reading the tea leaves entirely backwards. You're right.
the tea leaves tell me Gunner, but I'm kind of this is the one where I'm ignoring it a bit. So,
So
uh,
my frustration though is I don't see I could see Bo Collins being swapped for Lil Jordan Humphrey, at least for now. And I say that as like an asterisk of like this could just be a wide receiver from another team entirely. There is no like physical presence in this group. I mean, I think that there's some level of like being able to get off of a jam from Bo Collins, maybe. I think Lil Jordan Humphrey brings a little bit more of that. He's a bigger bodied guy. Um, but that's something that I find lacking in this group here, and part of that is, again, Jalin Hyatt being here. Is like, I don't wanna say he's useless, but, like, it's hard to see the value that he brings to this group at this point. Same as Dante Miller is like, "Okay, you're fast."
yeah, it's frustrating. So, but you have the starters Hyatt, Collins, and then Olszewski.
Yes.
All right, we've differed on one. All right, tight end. This is the one where the tight end is I think the most difficult to predict. Uh, because you have Theo Johnson and Chris Manhurst who are locks. It seems like Bellinger is a lock. Maybe they'll go to him with the pay cut thing. Uh, Greg Dulcich, Thomas Fidone. Like again, they might keep 3, they could keep 4, but if they keep 4, they're going to cut somebody that people are going to want to keep around. So I'm keeping Bellinger, and then I'm going Dulcich. He is someone they picked up off waivers last year. They carried him on the 53-man roster. And I just think, especially Theo's dealing with some type of injury right now. We don't know how serious it is. Where Dulcich can give you some value. Like, if you don't have Theo Johnson, Dulcich is your third down tight end. Like, he flat out is just playing. He's better than the other guys on third down. Where with Fidone, it's like I like what he did in preseason, but I just don't view him as a guy who's going to get a lot of targets in the NFL. But I understand if they want to keep a draft pick, though. So I'm keeping the top 3 and then Dulcich over Fidone. I'm keeping 4 tight ends.
Do you buy into any of the potential Daniel Bellinger being traded?
I don't think he has much trade value. I don't think he's even like a pick swap because he's not going to go start for anybody or be even. I just don't see it, and he's not someone that people are going to look at as like a project, give him a shot like the Isaiah Simmons or Boogie Basham as a second round. Like, so he doesn't get that benefit down. He's just kind of a 4th round tight end who's played a little bit of his first year.
Yeah,
Oh, I
he
think Greg
actually
Dulcich had more receiving yards his first year than Daniel Bellinger did.
Oh, how about I could see that though. Um, we have the exact same 4. I could see Greg Dulcich being swapped out for Thomas Fidone. For me right now, I don't think Fidone showed enough that the other 31 teams are clamoring to be like, "Ah, we should have taken him in the 7th round. What did we do? Let's go get him if he sneaks on." Like, no, I don't see that happening. I do think that there is a future for him. I think that he showed promise. I think that he is a red zone threat that they could get maybe even at the tail end of this year, be elevated off the practice squad, but I see him as a practice squad addition. But I could see it switched with Dulcich. I could see it. I'm not gonna predict it. I wouldn't do it. Um, I think off the bat, Dulcich just gives you more at the beginning of the season. I think that Russell Wilson, having worked with him in the past, goes for something, based on the limitations that Russell Wilson already has built into his game anyway. So
How many offensive linemen do you have? And if you were putting them in the pool, which one would look the best with their shirt off? And you're saying, what are you talking about a pool for, Bobby? Well, this season has the best NFL pools on the planet. They're different types of pools than the ones I used to clean. Season runs fast, easy to play, and affordable sports pools for busy people like myself and Grump. No spreads, no drafts, no salary caps. The pools are so simple. Grump's Grump's brother could play. And Grump's brother, yeah, we don't talk about him much. Do you have a brother?
You don't want me to do this on camera.
Okay. All right. Yeah, maybe I opened up a can of worms for something I didn't know about. There's 200,000 in prizes across their NFL pools with 8,000 plus members competing. It's legal in all 50 states. You get pools and content that runs all season long from week 1 through the Super Bowl. Their big Survivor pool has a $50,000 grand prize. Woo! I entered into a 50-50 at the race the other day, and every time I'm just telling myself, this is gonna be it. Like, what if we win and I don't? But with Big Pool Survivor, you have a much better chance. Using our referral links gets you 58% off the 12 pool bundle. Just $50 for 6 months of entertainment. An exclusive $500 prize to whichever Giants Nation fan lasts longest in the big Survivor pool if we get 100 people in. So you got to use the link. Get free pools for life by referring friends with your link. Our link is www.theseasonszn.com/GN. We're also giving away free entries on each podcast running up to kickoff in the YouTube comments. Create your own account using our link, then reply to the pinned YouTube comment below with your season username, and we'll randomly select a winner for each episode. Remember to use our link to be eligible. That's www.theseason.com/GN. You'll be glad you did.
You'll be glad you did.
All right, so get back on track, Molly. That never happened. How many offensive linemen do you have total before you go tackle guard center?
This was my most frustrating thing. I wound up with 10, which put me at 26 guys on offense, so I had to go 24 defense.
Me too. I have 10 too, which it doesn't make sense to keep 10 offensive linemen. And what's crazy is there's 10. I don't have someone who is actually just a flat out backup center. Like I don't have Austin Schlottman in there. I only have JMS. So the locks are Thomas, Illuminor, Hudson, Bowe, Runyon, Van Roten, Schmidt. So there is 7 locks.
Right.
I kept Neal because they're going to keep Neal. Aaron Stinney, who I think should be their top backup guard. And then, I don't know, do they keep their 3rd round pick from a few years ago on Josh Azudu now that he's back at guard? Or am I reading way too much into Josh Azudu at guard? Like, I don't know, but I threw Azudu in there.
So I don't know because we didn't really see a lot of Josh Azudu this preseason. So I'll just before we get into like the nuances of those last few spots, I'll just go through what I have. And I have, our starting 5. James Hudson has the money. Marcus Bowe has been promising and is a draft pick. And then I have Evan Neal because he's got $8 million guaranteed and for literally no other reason. I do have Austin Schlottman because there is no backup center on this roster. And I went Josh Azudu because he's a draft pick, but it's really close because I could switch that with Aaron Stinney. We saw Aaron Stinney and Josh Azudu both look pretty good. To me, Josh Azudu does offer you more flexibility, and they do value that. So that was my edge over it. I also think you can make an argument for Jake Kubis if you wanted to, because he is a pretty decent run blocker, has been, he is a developmental project for him. They do view him in a favorable light. He needs to clean up his pass blocking. He hasn't looked that great this preseason, but he's also cross training at center. The big thing for me here is that you're holding on to Evan Neal for no reason. And other than money, there's no reason. He's not your top guard. If he has to play, you're in dire straits. He's not going to do a good job. And it stinks. And part of me was wearing a tinfoil hat while doing this and was thinking that like the broadcast team in preseason week 2 was hyping up Evan Neal for trade value. Some other team, and I know that this is stupid, but maybe some other team out there thinks that they can get something out of him, and maybe not even trade value. I have no idea. I have no idea. It just, I don't think Evan Neal gives you anything, but you're just financially locked into having him, and that's it.
Yeah, and again, as much as I've been pretty anti-Neal, he is just moving the guard. So, like, keep him around and hope he can. And again, if the season's bad at the end of the year, I'll want to see him out of curiosity.
Well, listen. I hear you on that, but Marcus Bowe was playing left tackle for the first time and didn't look this shitty. You're just, you know what I mean? There are
Dude, you don't have to
skills.
tell me what I'm saying is I just think they're going to keep Evan Neal.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's not simply just if they could save money or whatever, minimum player, they'd probably cut him. But I just think that they moved in the guard and they're just willing to see it throughout the year. So unless, if he starts doing things like showing up late or whatever in season, I can see a cut happening. But I think he'll hang around for the whole year. Um,
So you got torn on Azudu and Schlattman. That was your
well, I got torn on even keeping a 10th offensive lineman. Now,
yeah.
Zudu
So
was
did I.
also, I guess, dealing with an injury. He wasn't at practice on Sunday. Um, so he played tackle the first preseason game, guard the second preseason game, and then maybe there was some hype about that, but he didn't play in the third one. At first, I thought it was like because of roster stuff, but no, he guess he's dealing with some type of injury. So maybe I'm reading into it too much, but he was a third round pick, and maybe they just keep him at guard. So I don't think I've ever done 10 offensive linemen for this episode every year. Um, let's switch to the defense. So we both had 26 guys on offense. Uh, let's go. Let's get some easy ones done. Outside linebacker: Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, Chauncey Golson. Did you have anybody else there?
Um, yeah, I added in Trace Ford as a possible. I my swap there isn't with the same position though, where I could see him. He kind of got added, and he was like the 53rd guy I added, and it's whether he stays or they keep a fourth safety is where I got kind of caught up.
Okay. Okay. Um, so you have Trace. Okay, so you have five. I have those four guys who are roster locks. Let's go to defensive tackle. Dexter Lawrence is a lock. Darius Alexander and Roy Robertson Harris are locks. I have them keeping Nacho. Elijah Chapman kind of feels like a roster lock. I don't think they're doing this full book stuff just for shits and giggles. And they just really like him. And you know what? I'm keeping 6. DJ Davidson. He had a decent preseason, which I don't buy into it, but he at least gives you some beef, and really nobody else outside of Dex, out of any of those guys, gives you that. Nacho and Robertson don't. Alexander hasn't showed much, and then Chapman clearly doesn't. I mean, it's kind of funny seeing him next to the other guys around him. So it's just giving yourself some type of beef where if Dexter to go out for a quarter, you could put someone at nose tackle consistently.
I have the exact same 6. Yeah, and for all the same reasons. Um, I think the only thing I got hung up on was whether or not it would be Davidson or, like, Elijah Garcia or something who looked pretty good, but I
Could
just
be
think
that.
they like DJ Davidson. They've always liked DJ Davidson, and he did have a pretty decent preseason, so I had no reason not to put him in there.
Okay. Linebacker: Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Darius Molasau are locks. I only kept 4. Usually this is a plentiful special teams position. And then, Demetrius Flanagan fouls. He's been injured. But I kept Chris Board, who they brought in from the Ravens and gave some real money as the 4th guy. Do you have 4? Those 4? Anybody else?
Now I have those 4. I do think that they wanted to have Demetrius Flanagan fouls really involved, but he's been hurt. So I wouldn't be surprised if they move him to an injured list or something so that when he's not hurt, they can bring him back in. But I mean, I have no reason to like, I haven't seen anything of him. So I went with those 4. Yeah.
Okay. All right. With corner, Paulson Adebo, Drew Phillips, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flaw are locks. I went Trey Hawkins. It's still only year 3 for Hawkins. And, he's been like kind of their first outside guy up, considering the fact that 2 other guys are battling for the same spot. So technically not technically, he is the second guy up. And then I kept Nick Jones. He hasn't shined the same way he did the first couple days of training camp, but he is their backup nickel corner, and he plays a ton of special teams. I think he played the most special team snaps for them in preseason. So I'm keeping him, and I'm doing this. Corey Black, I'm putting on IR, so I'm not totally throwing away the 7th round pick. He's going to IR.
I felt the same way about Corey Black. I went with Adebo, Flott, Phillips, Banks, Hawkins, and then I did Art Green over Nick Jones. I thought that Art Green looked pretty good in spurts. I think he brings some special teams value, and I think whether or not you have to go to Art Green or Nick Jones, you're in trouble anyway. So I tried not to wrestle too much in my mind with any of that.
Okay, let's do safety, and then we could do our last, talk about what our last 4 in, last 4 out were. Safety: Javon Holland, Tyler Newman, Dane Belton, locks. And then I kept Raheem Lane, who's been their 4th guy all of camp. This is obviously a position we could see them trying to, pick up somebody on waivers. They are number 3 in the waiver order. But Raheem Lane, and then those 4 guys, obviously. How about you?
Yeah, so I only went with 3 here, and it was Newbin, Holland, and Belton. I went with Trace Ford over Raheem Lane, and the reason is because I do think that they're gonna bring in somebody here, and then Trace Ford ends up getting cut. So that was my logic. I hope everybody hung on to that whole thing. Well,
You know what? With these roster predictions, there's always something like that where it's like only this amount, where it's like, oh yeah, but they have plans to do something in there. So I don't, I guess to get these right, you kind of have to go a little bit. The IR rules and everything, it kind of makes it impossible to do a true, like, perfect 53. Just because there is so much, like, and then, they could, a couple of times they've cut Casey Kreider just to save room to put somebody to IR. Um, so we'll and then our special team, speaking which, are Casey Kreider, Graham Gano, Jamie Gillen. If you say anything wrong else, Grump, I don't I may just reconsider a lot of different things.
no, I guess I was only gonna say, how long is Jude McAtamey, like, eligible for the IPP thing, the, IPP exemption?
Alright, well, it's the International Pathway Program, okay? I don't expect our listeners to know what IPP stands for.
Sorry.
I think it's 2 years, because I think it was 2 years before Sandro became part of, like, actually on the roster.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, how about I PP you in the face?
Oh,
Uh
shit.
Last 4 in, last 4 out. My last 4 in were DJ Davidson, Greg Dulcich, Josh Azudu, and Nick Jones. Um, Last 4 out were Demetrius Flanagan Fowles, Thomas Fidone, Art Green, and Gunnar Olszewski.
My last 4 in were Greg Dulcich, Bo Collins, um, Josh Azudu, and Trace Ford. Those were my last 4 in, I'm sorry. My last 4 out were Fidone, um, Aaron Stinney, Raheem Lane, and, I guess Lil Jordan Humphrey. 'Cause it was hard for me to do just 4 because it was like 5 or 6 I was kinda bouncing around. You're muted.
I said, all right, well, that's our 53-man rosters. We're going to kick it to Patricia Traina. Before that, this episode was brought to you by Body Armor. Body Armor is the best sports drink in the world. Rewrite your routine and choose better with Body Armor. Body Armor is real hydration with electrolytes, coconut water, and no artificial dyes. Yeah, get those things out of my face. Flavors or sweeteners with great tasting flavors like strawberry, banana, and orange mango. Body Armor will level up your hydration game. Grab Body Armor Sports Drink today at your local grocery store. Body Armor, choose better. Did you know, Grump, that I was at the race on Saturday night? The Body Armor driver, Ryan Blaney, young Ryan Blaney, he won.
I did know that, and that's 'cause I follow you on Twitter.
Okay, thank you for following me on Twitter. All right, and here is Patricia Traina. We now welcome on to the program the last interview of the training camp series as training camp comes to a conclusion and we get towards 53-man roster cutdowns of Locked On Giants and Sports Illustrated Giants Country, Patricia Traina. Thank you, Patricia, for joining me. And I'm excited. You're going to close out the interview series, and we got to get your record prediction at the end, too.
Oh boy, that's gonna be fun. Thanks for having me, Bobby. Good to see you.
Of course. So we've kind of moved totally past training camp, but I wanted to ask you this now that it's come to a conclusion, essentially. Who has been your biggest surprise of 2025 training camp slash preseason? Like, whether it's someone who's performing better or worse, or someone who came out of nowhere for you.
Um, I'm gonna give you a couple if I could.
Sounds good to me.
Biggest surprise, I think Joshua Zudu has played a little bit better this year now that they kind of like settled him in at guard. But so I got to give him shout out because I didn't know what was going to happen with him. I think obviously Jaxson Dart has been a nice surprise for everybody, not because we didn't think he would get to this point, but just how quickly he has developed. You've got people talking about, oh, he should start, he should be the quarterback too. He has really developed. And, I don't know if you remember, but when he first came out of school, there were a lot of people who said, oh, he's a project, he's probably a year away. And he kind of answered a lot of questions, I think, for people. You could put him in the surprise category. And then I think in terms of the negative side, I'm a little disappointed that we haven't seen more from Darius Alexander, the defensive lineman. But to be fair to him, he did miss the entire spring with an unknown injury. So I think he's a little behind where he should be. But overall, I would say the Giants, 3-0 in the preseason, which I know doesn't mean anything, but they look like they finally have a competent offense. The defense, has looked pretty good, I think. So I'd like to think that they're headed in the right direction. But of course, as we know, preseason is just that. It's preseason. It doesn't count, and it won't count until we get to the regular season.
So I think you've started two good conversations. The Jaxson Dart one leads into the next question, so I want to hold off on that for a second. But Darius Alexander, because we didn't mention him in the first portion of this show where we do a 53-man roster, besides just saying he's on the roster. But now that training camp and preseason is over, I put out a tweet too. I was like, I think he's been the most disappointing player of this portion because me personally, I didn't have this. I didn't really believe Neil and how like those are past disappointments for me. Anything from them would have been found money for me. But and clearly, like being disappointed doesn't mean that well you've just written him off. It's 3 preseason games. It's a training camp, but it is a disappointment for the first pick of the third round. He didn't do. It's not like he in practice did something and games didn't. In practice, he was like the most disappointing player of practice. And then in the preseason games, he just didn't really do anything. Like usually rookies put together, you can put together a little 8-play highlight reel. Thomas, every single one of their other ones have done it, except for Corey Black, who's been injured. Fedoni, Bo, Scadaboo's been injured. Dart and Carter. With Alexander against, third and fourth strings, I'm watching Elijah Garcia and Corey Durden, do some of those things, and DJ Davidson. I'm disappointed that Alexander hasn't done that. Like you said, missed the spring. It looked like early in camp he was behind, like out of shape wise, because of that. Where he looked gassed early on. So it's not a final verdict on him. It's not saying, oh well, I think he's going to be a bust now. But it has been a disappointing training camp and preseason for Darius Alexander because he really hasn't showed us anything. And guys usually at least give us some cut ups that we can say, hey, look, this is what this guy's working with.
Yeah, again, I think, he started off behind the 8 ball. I don't know what the injury was. Brian Dable hasn't been very forthcoming with injury news, but the talent is there. I mean, if you go back and you look at his college tape, he was kind of like a man amongst boys, considering he played for a smaller program. So there's talent there. But that being said, we haven't quite seen it transfer over to the NFL level. Now, the good news is Andre Patterson and Brian Cox, you've got 2 of the top defensive line coaches in the NFL working with this kid. They will get him up to speed, and he is a willing, participant. He's coachable. There's no attitude with him, but it's gonna take time. And, again, I can't say it enough. The missing the spring set him back, and now we're at a point now where, okay, preseason's done, training camp is done. Now, how much time can they actually devote to really developing him full time? You know what I mean?
Right.
They're gonna still be able to develop him, but it's not like they can say, "Okay, we're gonna give you 12 reps in practice," when they gotta get everybody else ready for the game.
Well, and it's because of the weakness of that room outside of Dexter Lawrence. There was a thought that Darius Alexander would be contributing right away if he wasn't the starter. And we do our pre-camp position battle polls every year for defensive tackle too. Darius Alexander got 83% of the vote. So there was some expectation and rookies always get a little more of bump in that than they should, but it wasn't unreasonable thinking that the other guys in the room were Roy Robinson Harris and Nacho. So hell, if Darius Alexander flourishes in year 2, are we going to look back at his year 1 where he didn't do much and care? No, I'm not. Like he's a young player. He's a rookie. Like he should be afforded time to develop. But I am disappointed that I'm looking at it as him someone who's not contributing at the least the start of the season by minimum, because I thought he would in that weak position group.
Yeah, I mean, outside of Dexter Lawrence, I don't know about you, Bobby, but I can't say I've been bowled over by what I've seen from the defensive line depth.
No, and Roy Robertson Harris, I think, has looked better in the preseason games than he did in training camp. So, hopefully when that translates to the regular season. But I just thought Alexander would be much more in the mix, and he looks like the guy, you know, from the rookie class who's just the least ready to go,
Yeah, I
outside of
I
Corey
agree,
Black.
but, the good news, like I said, they'll get him up to speed. It's just, you know, at what point will that the switch go on, the light go on
Yeah.
and say, "Okay, you know what? He's ready. He's up to speed. He's made up for it." I mean, we've seen it so many times with players in the past where they start off slow because they're coming off of an injury or whatever the case may be, and then, they cut good example was last year, Bobby Okereke, when they switched over the defensive system, Bobby Okereke at times looked like he didn't know what he was doing. And then he finally picked up what they were trying to do, and he looked much better down the line until, that unfortunate back injury that he had. So sometimes it takes a little extra time beyond training camp and beyond the preseason for a guy to really, pick up and hit the ground running.
On the positive side of your answer, you mentioned Jackson Dart. We've seen the last of Jackson Dart for now. You know, I've gotten rid of the for a while because I don't think, at least I don't know. What is next for Jackson Dart? Like, do they view this preseason as a huge stepping stone to like put him above Jameis in the depth chart? And I know we'll never get a clear answer on that until they come out the tunnel for week one. But like, what do you think is next for Jackson Dart as he goes kind of into the shadows for the start of the season?
I'm glad you asked me that because I just did a segment for that on Locked On Giants. What I think they're gonna do is they're never gonna really admit to who's quarterback 2. And the reason for that is as you know, in the past, when they've carried 3 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster, the 3rd quarterback has been inactive or the emergency quarterback, which means he can't play unless the 2 guys in front of him can't play. I don't think, unless there's like a rash of injuries and they have no choice, I don't think they're gonna deactivate Jackson Dart or designate him as the emergency quarterback. I think what they're gonna do is they're gonna take it week by week, and it depends on the game scenario. So, for example, let's say that there's a blowout, whether the Giants are blowing out in a team or vice versa. Well, now there's an opportunity if Jackson Dart is active to put him in there and get some live reps. Hopefully we're talking about a Giants blowing out the opponent to where they can afford to have him go out there, throw a few passes, just stay sharp, if you will, rather than have him totally ride the pine for the entire season. Now, if it's a case where they're still in a game and, God forbid, Russell Wilson gets hurt, now maybe they say, okay, you know what? We're kind of close here. We don't want to put Jackson out just yet, so we'll put Jameis out there. So I do think there can maybe be, for lack of a better description, a rotation at quarterback 2, just to make sure that they keep Jackson Dart sharp. I know they say, "Oh, we hope he doesn't have to play this year," but I think if there are opportunities within reason to get him into a game, I think they will.
That's a good point about the keeping them because I didn't really think about that. That like you said, if there's a blowout, they're going to want to get Dart some experience, and that could be the opportunity for him. And now, I guess if Jameis is the 3rd quarterback, then we would get that answer because then Jameis would just be the emergency backup. But um, I guess we would. I play out every scenario in my head as you're answering. Is I guess we would never get the true scenario unless Russ got injured and we see the next week who was the starter. But regardless, I think they're very happy with Jackson Dart. I've got a couple more niche questions for you, as we head towards this cut down day. Who is the returner? Is it Amir Smith-Marset or Gunnar Olszewski? Because going into camp, I thought it was clear as day this was his job. They bring in Gunnar when a couple guys got injured, and all of a sudden it seems a little more murky.
Well, why can't it be both? Why can't you have Smith Marset as the punt returner and Gunnar Olszewski as the kickoff returner?
Do
I
you
mean,
think
last
they're going to do that?
they could. I mean, last year they went back and forth with Eric Gray, at times. So why not have 2 different guys? I think what they ultimately wanted to do is, when they excuse me, when they lost Bryce Ford Wheaton to that injury, they lost the gunner. Well, I don't know if you could say Gunnar Olszewski is a punt gunner, but they brought him back because, he's familiar with the offense. He's familiar with, the team. He was here last year. Unfortunately, he was injured. So, yeah, I could see them maybe rotating guys in or, having him and Smith Marset back deep for kickoffs and just, going that route and just going with whoever's going to be the better guy or just seeing how, the kickoff comes.
Yeah, I think the difference with Gray is Gray had like a spot as that third running back. Is do they keep both guys? Because I don't think either one really. I don't think they view either one as a real receiving threat. I know Gunner did some good stuff in the preseason, but we've seen slot guys do that against backups time after time. Alex Bachman comes to mind. But so that's but who like I'll ask you. Let me change my question. Who is the punt returner? Because you can only have one guy who's back
Right.
there for the punts. Do you think it's Amir Smith or Gunner?
I think it's going to be Amir Smith Marset. I think he was just a smidge better, more productive wise, stat
Yeah.
wise than Gunner. That
Uh,
now, look, it's a good problem to have because if Smith Marset, heaven forbid, gets injured, you got a guy in Gunnar Olszewski who, can do it. But I think, if we go based off of production, I think I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say Amir Smith Marset averaged over 10 yards per punt return in the preseason. I don't remember the exact number, but I know it was higher than what Olszewski did. Now, is that going to be the criteria the coaches use? I don't know. But, he's a pretty good returner, and the fact that they brought him back, especially when he told me last year, he says, "Well, I wanna go someplace where I can maybe be worked into the offense as well," and I don't know how much he's gonna get worked into the offense, but he came back because they wanted him.
yeah, I mean he had a kick return for a touchdown last year. He had a punt return that was called back, and even the year before with Carolina, he had a punt return touchdown. So he's been a proven guy. And he had only one fumble last year, two the year before. So he's not like a guy who's got this chronic fumble issue. And Gunner has had that at times in his career. Hell, anytime you bring up his name, Steelers fans, shudder, which I don't think is totally fair, but I do think it's pretty interesting. Last question before we do record prediction. Could Jalen Hyatt be a surprise cut?
Oh, you know what? You never say never, but I'm gonna say no, and I'll explain why I say probably not. Jalen Hyatt was the guy Joe Shane traded up to get in the 3rd round, and he's only had the 2 years. I think they give him another year. Now, I'm not gonna debate whether he deserves another year or, whatnot, but because they traded up to get him, I don't see Joe Shane wanting to give up on him that quickly. I think they give him another year, and if it's still more of the same, then that's it. There's no justification to keep him further. But, it's gonna be interesting because without, being a fly on the wall, if I were a fly on the wall in that room when they decide who stays and who goes, I can pretty much guess what Brian Dable's gonna want and what Joe Shane's gonna want. So I do think, Jalen Hyatt sticks. I would be surprised if he doesn't. Should he stick based on what we have seen? It's interesting, Bobby. I went and I did a deep dive into his stats. Do you realize he has not yet run the entire route tree in the NFL? And I went and I looked up, Slayton, I looked up Malik Neighbors, I looked up Wandale Robinson. All of those guys at some point have been targeted on every single branch, if you will, of the route tree. Jalen Hyatt has not, which I found to be quite revealing. Um, Now, is that because he comes from a college program that was kind of a gadget offense? That could be it. I mean, we kinda knew that Jalen Hyatt coming in was gonna be a player that, maybe had a little deeper learning curve than, say, a Malik Neighbors. And we're seeing that, but, this kid, he knows that he's gotta be better. I mean, he's had trouble tracking the ball. The drops are a problem. There's no physicality. I think he only won on one of his contested catches all summer long. So there's a lot of room to grow for him. And whether or not, he can accomplish that as he continues to work in practice, assuming he makes the team, well, that remains to be seen.
I don't think he plays a position well. Like you said, with the route tree. I just did my film review on the game against the Patriots. which was his first preseason action. And there's it's just like you're releasing the wrong way. And so now you're running right at the safety. Instead, if you release the right way, you would have got a target here. Instead, you released the wrong way. And now everyone's my point of view from that would be if I'm the Giants and he throws if he threw like a fit like he did last year, where he kind of took his ball and went home and got mad about it, I'd wait for that. If he's willing to keep his keep working hard and get in line with everything, fine. If he's gonna throw a fit, I would cut him the next day. Which leads me to the final question. What is your record prediction for the 2025 New York Giants?
Oh, wow. I'm gonna say they win at least 6 games. I think best case scenario, 9. They go 9-7. No, do I have that right? 9-7 or 9-8?
9-8.
9-8. Okay, sorry. It's late, so my math is off. I think best case scenario, 9-8. I think worst case scenario, 6-11. I think this team should be a lot better. The quarterback play is much better. I do have some questions about the receivers, because other than Malik Neighbors, and you see the difference. I mean, you were at training camp. You saw the difference when Malik Neighbors was in there versus when he wasn't in there. So that's a concern. Can they pick that up? The run defense is still a concern for me. It was better this year, but it's got to be really better than it was last year. The pass rush is going to be fine, I think. I think they improved the defensive secondary. Special teams looks like it's improved, but there are still a couple of glaring question marks where I could see them maybe at 6-11. And, is that going to be enough to save Brian Dable? I don't know. It depends on how bad, that's the 6-11 really looks on a week to week basis.
Yeah, I'll say mine on our first preview pod, but I think 6-11 is something that it's double the wins as last year, which is crazy to think. As bad as last year, you get double the joy from it. That sounds good. For most teams would sign up for that, and unfortunately, the Giants are probably not the ones that would run to that.
Mm.
But it's a very tough schedule, and once you just go to are they better than this team and go down the list, the answer is not yes to a lot of that. So. I think Russ really is the biggest indicator of how many, like, it's very simplistic to say the quarterback, but it's like how much of an upgrade is he? Because if he plays well, then they can win some games with that defense. If he doesn't, if he just plays middle of the road, then we're probably going to lose more than they win.
Yeah.
But Patricia, you mentioned you're doing a segment like this for Locked On Giants. Well, where can people find that?
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube. The show was actually running, it's Sunday night as we record this. So it drops Sundays. It'll run all day Monday. So you can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we're doing stuff over on New York Giants Honest. That's really, I think, dynamite analysis that we're working on. This little nuggets that I found, just doing research and looking at stats and matching it up against film and stuff like that. So we're going to be dropping all that, in the coming days, obviously. And then, the big show. I mean, you're going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm sure everybody on the face of the planet's going to do it. But when the rosters are set, or at least the initial roster is set on Tuesday, I'm sure we'll all have our reactions and our takeaways and stuff like that.
Yep, I think Locked On might be the biggest podcast. I think they even have like a Locked On UConn, so it's a big podcast network.
It's a big network, and actually, Bobby, we're going to unveil. We have a new subset, if you will. It's called the Locked On Giants Squad Show, and it's a little different. It's going to be kind of like actually, what we're going to do is we're going to have like an hour long, twice a week. We're going to do an hour long live stream. During the week, it's going to be Jay Berman, who hosts the postcast, which is the immediate reaction. It'll be me, and we are scheduled to have Mark Collins, the former Giants cornerback, is going to join our squad show. And then after games, I'm not sure who the lineup's going to be. I think it's going to be Jay Berman, and I'm not sure who the other two people are going to be because I can't do post game. But it's just something new that we're going to roll out the first week of the season. So I'm really excited about that.
Good stuff. Excited to check it out. Patricia, thank you as always, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you, Patricia, for joining. Thank you, Grump, for doing the portion early with us. Appreciate you guys. So because so many things are fluid with the 53-man roster the next 2 days, I will do a reaction video, but our official podcast won't be out until Friday once we get waiver claims and everything that goes with that. So we'll see you then. And it's the last week of player profiles. Until then, let's go Big Blue.